first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
The world has failed, I tell you. The world has failed yet again.
Hi, everybody. I am joined by Nick from the Revolutionary Black Network. Definitely a revolutionary name. And he is a political commentator on foreign issues, on what's happening in the US. And we're going to have a conversation about the craziness in the world and how he and I, born from a left-wing perspective, how do we make sense of all the craziness that's going on? Hey, Nick, thank you so much for making yourself available. Do you just want to say a little bit about where people can find you and what you do and who you are and why you are?
Yeah, what's popping? I appreciate you inviting me on. Always good to talk to have different conversations with people from different perspectives, different backgrounds, and you're in the UK as well. So I think this would be an interesting conversation. You can find me on Twitter. I write on Substack as well. I live stream about 4 or 5 times a week on the Revolutionary Blackout. We're on YouTube and Rumble. Also stream on X, Twitter. So have a pretty significant online presence on YouTube. So make sure you guys check us out. We stream every day, every day.
Yes, yeah, very, very prolific. Very, very prolific. Okay. All right. Where should we start, Nick? You get the ball rolling.
A lot,
Okay, well,
a lot
look,
going on.
I'll start with something because yesterday I interviewed Yvonne Ridley. She was the journalist that she was captured by the Taliban many, many years ago. She sneaked in. They thought she was a spy. They released her after a few days when they were satisfied she was a journalist, and now she's a correspondent for the Middle East Monitor. And we were talking yesterday. It's a video that's out right now on my channel about how Israel is losing. And the other thing that I really, really wanted to bring you to your attention, and I've done a few videos with this guy, Chris Coverdale. He's got a website, bit.ly/make war history, how people, including people in the US, can withhold their tax because governments are breaking the law. They're breaking their own statutes. So
I was not aware.
sorry?
Yeah, I was not aware of that, but that's something that we like. That's why people hate paying taxes because they know our taxes are going to blowing up brown kids and ineffective neoliberal policies. Like if people have like tangible goods for their taxes, I think it'd be more of a patriotic thing. But I'm interested in learning more because I haven't heard about that.
Okay, well, listen, I'll connect you to Chris Coverdale, and what I will do, you won't see this, Nick, is there's a 37 pre-roll ad that I've made, which will go at the front of this video, which is about that, which is just in a nutshell. It's a different law in the UK, in the US, sorry, it's a different law. But in the in the UK and in the European Union and most countries that have ratified the Geneva Convention against Genocide and also some UN Convention against Terrorism, so they've made it into domestic law, it's illegal to fund terrorism or genocide. And in the UK, genocide is, get this, the killing of two or more people that are united by race, ethnicity, nationality, or religion
Too.
as part of a wider policy. So just two or more people, part of a wider policy. So the UK's support for Ukraine, for Israel, for bombing Yemen constitutes genocide.
Yeah, that's why we are seeing the West, Israel, and their allies flat out reject international law. They see the decline of their empire, and their plan is to bomb their way out of it.
Yeah.
And what the ICJ ruling, my question is how they can enforce it, but it's very significant because it literally could put a lot of people in Europe and the UK in trouble for supporting said genocide. But now we're gonna see like how real international law really is. Like in our country, the narrative, and I see this on CNN, MSNBC, and all different kind of political mainstream news where they shrugged their shoulders at the idea of genocide, even though it was found in the court of law to be that Israel is liable, and based on the overwhelming evidence, you had to be the most insane bad faith actor to dismiss that. And I want to take a moment, like, can we can think about like what that how giant that moment is because think about South Africa, where they had lawyers and judges, the people who were the legal scholars that put together this ironclad argument against Israel together. They were the same children and teenagers that grew up under apartheid South Africa. And then you had Israel that was a big funder and supporter of
Yeah,
apartheid South Africa. So these kids knew who were their enemies from day one. And instead of picking up the gun and engaging in violence, these people grew up, learned the law, and now they are holding their apartheid colonizers accountable. So now think about the contrast. We have South Africa and the global South that is using every legal mean possible to fight against, I apologize, but white European American society that view themselves as civilized, like they are the civilized society, while in the words of the most unhinged racists on society, the peasants, the dirt villagers, the third world countries, they are the ones who trying to uphold international law. And that's why it was a big moment, and that's why what you said earlier as well with people can legitimately be really held accountable for genocide is why I think the majority of the world is rooting for them.
yeah, yeah. No, that was very interesting what you said. I didn't get that connection myself. Of course, they grew up through apartheid. They can sniff it out, see it a mile off, and like, no, 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 this will not stand. And then you got European colonialists and American colonialists. I don't, some of them are white, some of them aren't, but it's that mentality that we rule the world, right? And actually, that's something I want to run past you. So I have voted green in the past. I won't again. I have solar panels. We installed them a long time ago. I drive a second-hand hybrid, a Prius, and I cycle around. Not because it's green, but I like cycling. It's my preferred mode of transport, right?
It's a good way to exercise for sure.
Yeah, yes. The whole climate change agenda. Consider this. The continent that is a net importer of hydrocarbons with a historical unbroken legacy of imperialism. Its civilizing mission before was Christianity as a justification for destroying local cultures and plundering resources. It's now the climate change agenda, net zero. It's for your
Very
own
interesting.
good. So no hydrocarbons for Tanzania, no hydrocarbons for Bangladesh. We're doing this for you, for your own good, when actually the reality is they don't have any hydrocarbons themselves.
It's it's so absurd. And we were talking before. I told you and I think it's like very clear to say that I'm about to the left of 99% of the populace in my country at least. But I despise liberal culture.
Yeah,
And the climate agenda is one of those things like when you talk to Marxists and revolutionaries and people who focus on class conscious, it's clear to me that it was a scam by the liberal establishment. Now, I will fight to the death and to my grave the people who dismiss environmentalism as an important cause.
yeah.
And I see you nodding your head. I didn't know your position on this because most people would take what the climate grifters, um, Al Gore. I don't know why I blanked on his name. Al Gore, like those grifters, and they use them to delegitimize environmentalism. Environmentalism is legit. Like there's a spiritual and religious connotation to men protecting the earth.
Mm,
And as people who are meant to protect our future generation, if you punt the ball on that, you are not a man. If you're willing to sacrifice the environment of your children. But with that said, the climate agenda had nothing to do with that.
yeah, that's right.
And I think we can come to that agreement now. And I say that because there are people that are critics of the liberal climate agenda who don't care about environmentalism at all. They for
Yeah.
polluting the planet. Those are people that we got to fight, but we also got to be able to call out this insane grip that is the climate agenda. And one of the reasons why I knew it was a grip, because as you can tell, I care about the environment.
Mm,
And I'm not even religious. I just say that because if you're in the Bible, if you're religious, it makes no sense for you not to care about the planet that God left you. But I'm
mm,
not religious, but even spiritually as a human, I feel like I have an obligation to protect this earth, right? But I
yeah.
knew the climate agenda was a scam because the same people that claim they care about the environment were funding the military industrial complex, the largest polluter in human history, at record levels. So when I see the hypocrisy, when I see these people claim they care about the climate that flying around in private jets and emit more than the working class as a whole, I realized it wasn't about the climate, it was about control. So I'll
Yeah.
pass it to you. So I think that's generally my thoughts on that. But I'll pass to you for any additional thoughts that you may have.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you there. Because all they bang on about really is carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide. They're not talking about habitat destruction. They're not talking about dealing with pollution.
Absolutely.
They're not talking about the poverty, the grinding poverty of people in the third world, and how they are crushed by big business, by Western
Well
corporations
said.
plundering their resources, and corporations buying up their farmland, and the whole inequality of the cash crop economy. No, it's carbon dioxide, cow farts, and we have to stop farming, right? Because farming's really bad for the environment. But apparently, printing money to build bombs and send them across the world to drop on people elsewhere in foreign lands, that's okay. That's not harmful for the environment. That doesn't add to your carbon footprint.
And you know, another sign that liberals was deeply unserious about this, and even when the like Bernie Sanders left, when they was like praising the Paris Climate Accords, and I feel like no one read the Paris Climate Accord or knew what it did. I don't blame anyone who don't know it because a lot of me people didn't talk about it. I did. Like
Right.
when you look at the Paris Climate Accord, when you look at the five largest countries that signed on to the pledge, none of the five largest countries was even close to meeting the environmental emission standards of the Paris Climate Accord. It was used as a weapon to bludgeon poorer countries, and they were using that to attack and sanction poorer countries who wasn't meeting the standards that the big countries wasn't making. And the funniest part about it was one of the key parts of the Paris Climate Accords was that the larger nations was to help set up the infrastructure needed for developing countries to be more environmentally friendly, CO2 friendly, or whatever their general goal was. You guys know that mechanism was never set up. Like the mechanism that in the aid that was meant to help other countries meet their missions never set up from the beginning. So it was always a sham. It was always a fraud. It was a way for these big countries to wave and pretend they were actually doing something and gas like that. It pretty much was a sham. But I'll pass it to you as
Okay.
well.
But it's also a form of imperialism. So what the British did is they supported a local ruling class, like in India, and they gave them funding, and they had them rule and lord over the local people, and implement British rule done by proxy by local elites. Climate change agenda has done the same thing, where they fund NGOs and they fund governments, and they give bribes to presidents and stuff. You're going to have all this money, but you have to do this, which essentially means no hydrocarbon development for you, because carbon dioxide. Nick, do you know what happens when when there's more carbon dioxide in the air? According to the global warming cultists, right? Well, the
Right.
atmosphere warms up, right? You got more carbon dioxide. So the argument goes, you got warmth, and then when you have warmth, you have more evaporation and more rain. Yeah. So carbon dioxide plus warmth plus water in the presence of daylight, that's the formula for photosynthesis. So carbon dioxide, plant food, the photosynthesis, the foundation of the entire food chain for the planet, is bad for us. What hogwash. Absolute. Now, here's the crazy thing. People buy it. I asked my friends now, how much of the atmosphere do you think is carbon dioxide? I'll ask you, do you know, Nick? If you know the actual figure, don't say so.
I don't know. I don't know. It's like a low. It's like a low amount, right? Like 2%, 3%. That'd be my guess. I'm not scientist though.
Okay. All right. Well, I asked somebody today, and they said it's 50%. I asked a friend of mine who's a teacher, it's 50%, right? That's what they said. It actually, nitrogen is 78%. Carbon dioxide is, oxygen is 28%. Carbon dioxide is 0.04%.
Right, so that's a little bit better because I was thinking 2%. At least I'm not. At least I'm not as bad as the people that said 50%.
That's
But
right. That's
go
right.
ahead.
Not, but that shows how much they go on about it. Carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide. Oh my God, we're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. You tell him 0.0% has more of an effect than the sun? Really?
What what will you say to the people? Just because I'm familiar with a little bit of the argument,
Yeah.
what will you say to the people that say that even small disruptions, even if it's not a lot, may cause kind of? I'm just curious on what you would say to that. Like they would say, I can see them saying that. Oh, maybe even if it's not a lot, a small disruption may cause a big problem.
Yeah,
What's the general pushback to that?
they are surprised that it's that low. So it's a bit like, oh, oh. And then I point out that it's photosynthesis, an essential ingredient for photosynthesis. And then I asked them, because there's all this other stuff that is omitted from the discourse. I asked them, so you're saying 0.04% is a bigger factor than the sun, is a bigger factor than cosmic radiation, is a bigger factor than the magnetosphere, is a bigger factor than the Milankovitch cycles, or the ICTZ, or the Pacific geodecadal oscillation, and all these other factors that are omitted from the discourse.
You're actually teaching me a lot right now regarding how they, because once again, as you see, I wasn't into the climate agenda, but as you explained it to me, I'm like, man, it's crazy how fraudulent they are, because I think taking everything you're saying at face value because it's new information,
Yeah,
it's just another example of how liberals twist and distort what I think is really important issues. Because when I talk about environmentalism, I think like water poisoning is a big
yeah,
issue. And based on what I'm hearing no pushback from you on that point. Like for example, Gaza, like 97% of the drinking water in Gaza is poisoned.
mm,
There's a story I did, and only RBN did probably, for the most part, where the U.S. military was dumping toxic material, like forever chemicals, into the water, which was accelerating cancer rates in Black communities in the United States. Like not like in a random African or South American. No, in the United States, the military was caught dumping toxic waste. And then there was a story that came out maybe 2 years ago where the U.S. Navy had a big spillage of toxic material that poisoned the water of indigenous Hawaiian people. So, and the reason I bring this up because and to your point, you mentioned how they constantly talk about carbon dioxide. I think that's is to deflect from the real problems that they cause, because
yeah.
these are problems of militarism. That's why I find your perspective pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty damning because I never really took that angle before, like debunking their CO2. I just called it fraudulent because they had an obvious profit motive. They were using that to entrench the establishment power. Your argument is very convincing, though, and I think that's just another reason why it clear to me that they are deflecting from like the real environmental issues. Like, and this also leads to like the acidification of the oceans, all this stuff that they don't talk about. You know what I mean? But I'll pass it back to you, brother.
The acidification ain't happening. It's a lie. There aren't there
That's a
aren't
lie.
more,
That's a lie too.
there aren't more hurricanes. There aren't more people dying because of climate. Climate's always changing, but it ain't because of 0.04% carbon dioxide. It's because of the sun. You know how the Earth has cycles, a 24-hour cycle, a
Yeah.
365-day cycle, and the moon has cycles. Well, the sun has cycles. The sun waxes and wanes. The sun sends out more heat and it sends out less heat. The sun's penumbra uh, gets smaller and gets larger. More cosmic radiation hits the planet. The magnetosphere weakens and strengthens. None of that is in the mainstream discourse. And any scientist who talks about it is omitted and censored. Now, another
And that
part
was
for me.
frustrating to me. That's frustrating to me because I remember when during the COVID narrative, once again, I'm not a scientist. I want to see the debate. Like I want to see a top scientist that has your position versus like a Bill Nye, the science guy. So someone like that, you know what I mean? Like someone who's like super pro climate agenda versus someone who debunking it. The same way I wanted to see as someone who was trying to shift through this information. I wanted to see someone who is considered extremely anti-vax debate someone who's pro-vax, because I think these conversations debate are very important in the scientific process. And to your point, like whenever there are scientists that will rebuke the climate agenda, the same way they rebuke the big pharma agenda, they immediately push to censorship.
Man,
And I never understood that. It didn't serve my interest to advocate for censorship because I'm like, I don't know where to land on all these issues. I don't know anything about vaccines. I don't know anything about climate, right? So I want to see people who disagree talk about it, and I can reach my own conclusion. But that last part is exactly why the establishment don't want it to happen.
yeah.
Because people will reach their own conclusion, right?
Yeah, and the big tell about climate change, and we can move on to COVID, right? It's the same thing. The stuff that you and I agree on, pollution, poverty, habitat destruction, that's grassroots up. The CO2 agenda is from the elites, the corporate elites,
I can
Al
see that.
Gore, right? They don't care about us. They're interested, they've got their own self-interest, which is natural. You and I have our self-interest, that's human, right? But the fact that it's top down is another tell for me. It's not a grassroots movement, right? We're going to
That's a good point.
do you know fractals, Nick? Okay, I'm going to tell
The
you
what?
fractals. Fractals are self-repeating patterns at different scales, right? And they show up in human behavior. Now, let's say, for example, I'm an out and out racist. And just to reassure you, I'm not. Okay. The people, me, I live at home with my wife and my sister and my 16-year-old, 19-year-old, right? And I got my friends and my job, right? The people who are going to be impacted by that discourse of racism that's coming out of my mouth are the people around me. Now, if I become prime minister and I've got the same discourse, it's the same conversation, but on a much larger scale. I'm going to impact more people with that conversation. And then if I become, I don't know, head of the EU, even more people are going to be impacted by that same conversation. So it's the same pattern, but on different scales. So the climate change agenda, what we have are the elites telling everybody else what's good for us. It's for our own good. We must listen or they will punish us. They know what's right. You and I, we're just plebeians, we're plebs, we don't know nothing. We need to bow to our masters. And you know, yes, sir, and all of that stuff, right? And just do
Yeah,
as we're told. So that's another tell. That's not the case with grassroots environmentalist movements that spring out of the Amazon or India or wherever, right? Completely different discourse. And
absolutely.
and then the censorship is a tell, because real science doesn't censor. Real science engages in questions and debates and isn't about inquiry. No, nowadays, liberal science, this is the new God. This is you must just blindly follow the climate change cultists. Over to you.
And that never makes sense to me. Like as someone who was a leftist in this country, since when did we started unapologetically like standing and defending big pharma? Like this is something that I found to be extremely weird early on. Like I thought we were supposed to be, and I was very open-minded on that. But like even if you're extremely open to everything they're saying, like when you guys be open to the people criticizing the companies that are making $1,000 per second on the vaccine? Now, I played a lot of basketball. I was uh I was a martial artist. I did a lot of jiu-jitsu competitions back in the day. So I was really into nutrition. I'm a little bit older now, getting a little bit way in my time. But
I,
I
I
was a good
know.
athlete at one point. Uh, and I remember I lost a ton of weight after high school. Got really lean, really athletic. And during this time, I learned a lot about nutrition. Like
Yeah.
I was obsessed. Like the same way I'm obsessed with politics now. I was obsessed about nutrition back then. And I learned in my 19s and 20s how the FDA and how government and scientists had this big elaborate conspiracy to lie to people about how food, like they blame like animal fat and promoted bread. I still remember the food pyramid from in the 90s. I don't know how it was in the UK, but they had this ridiculous food pyramid that said you had to eat all this bread, minimum amount of meat. So essentially that was proven to be a lie. And a
Yeah.
lot of people are suffering from cancer. And I think that it affected a lot of people's mental health because they essentially told us to eat a diet that was completely unnatural. And I'm actually summing this up real quick for the sake of time. Essentially, they lied about regarding dieting and food. And remember, they lied to us about smoking. My grandpa died because he had lung cancer. He was a big smoker, even to the day he died. But he grew up in an age where doctors used to tell people that smoking was good for you. They used to prescribe people cigarettes.
Wow.
I don't know how it was in the UK, but in the United States history, like in the 60s and 70s, doctors used to prescribe cigarettes. And they used to
Wow.
say it make you more manly. So you have a history of the science establishment being wrong. Why do people think that's different now?
Yeah.
That's why I was always questioning of the narrative because I knew like, damn, they lied about smoking, they lied about the FDA, they lied about all this stuff. So why do people switch now? So that's I know
Sure.
that's just my intro to the COVID thing, but that's why I never understood why the left like bent their knee towards it. You know what I mean? But I'll pass it to you.
Sure. Wait, well, one, I didn't take those injections. I was like, there's no way I'm having that. There's no
Me
way.
neither.
No way. No way. I know about Tuskegee. I know about thalidomide. My parents were
Absolutely.
homeopaths. I don't trust Big Pfizer. They don't know my interests. I will go sit in the sun and get as dark as I can and get as much vitamin D as the English summer will allow me to do so. Right? That'll
Why
do
I
it,
spoke
right?
out against mandates. I was very lucky because I used to sell cars, and then I eventually quit my job to do activism. I got to now do citizen journalism. Very lucky I didn't have a boss to tell me to get a job because I know people who got the job who did not want to get it, but they had to do it because of their job. And people like to romanticize. I see a lot of people do this online. Oh, I quit my job because of the job. Like I know people with kids, man. Are you gonna make a political stand, or are you gonna just bite the bullet and take a jab and so you can feed your children. But I've seen people make these decisions, and now I see a lot of people regret. I see people have health issues, all this stuff. Hopefully, I don't get your channel in trouble. We can't talk about this on
No, you
YouTube that
won't. No,
often.
no, no, no.
But
This bit may not be on you. Well, you don't have to put it on
all right,
YouTube.
cool. I was want to ask beforehand because they're very tricky about this. So then I started speaking up about the COVID issue around the mandates. Like I was on Jimmy Dore show, and that's when I spoke out against mandates, and I did a few segments like this is clearly anti-work class, and I remember like the backlash I got from the Bernie left,
Mm.
from people who consider themselves friends of the working class, who was okay with people being fired for not taking an experimental drug, and I had Howie Hawkins on my show. He was the former Green Party candidate in 2020. And I asked him like about mandates. I'm like, will you be okay with like a single mother with two kids who got fired and couldn't feed their children because they didn't take a vaccine? And he said, I wouldn't care.
Wow.
And I'm like, you guys
Wow.
lost your damn
See,
mind.
but Nick,
Because
there's a
now the left
problem.
position is that we don't care about mothers losing their jobs. Like this is crazy. This is an old interview you can see on my channel. But I know y'all reacted. So I'll pass it to you. I know y'all
Oh,
reacting to that.
Nick, there's a problem with you and I, right? There's a problem with you and I, right? We are dinosaurs. We think the Nuremberg Code stands for something. We need to move with the times and forget those old-fashioned notions about bodily autonomy and informed choice, right? Things have moved
Yep.
on, and there's a little clip I found of, and I played it a couple of times in the videos of Tony Benn. Say, you know Tony Benn, right? Of course, you know the late great Tony Benn saying,
Heard
"There's
the
two
name.
ways to demoralize a people. There's two ways to control the people. You demoralize them or you frighten them." And lockdown did both. It demoralized people and it frightened people. And then they become easier to control, like let me out. And some of the evils and inequities of lockdown, I'm not particularly religious. I'm a Muslim, but I'm not particularly religious. And like, you can't, the government doesn't get to say whether people can go and pray. Government doesn't get to intervene in the relationship between a human being and their God or gods. No, 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 no. That's not the government's job. If people of a particular faith want to get together, even when there's this so-called raging scamdemic going on, right? So be it. Let them do that. It's not for government to intrude. People will work it out themselves. And that's one of the problems I think about the left. It's happened with the Labour Party, and I think it's happening with the Democrats. How damn statist it's got. Like
Yeah.
incredibly
It's
statist. Go
yeah,
on.
they are they embraced, and I'm trying to make this very simple because I can get in a long diatribe about who we talking about, liberal, neoliberal, or progressive, but let's keep it vague and simple. These people view the right as such a threat that they view that, and once again, being very vague. They feel like they have to use state power to suppress on people they view as the enemy.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that in the process of doing that, they become the capitalist big government authoritarian that left principles want to resist in the first place. So, and the best example to kind of make that make sense is is like how they treated January 6th protesters. Like, isn't it weird? And I'm an abolitionist, and we can talk about that because I believe our police state is one of the drivers of a lot of authoritarianism that we see in our country. But we've seen the left went from challenging the police state, and now they was 100% for it. They
Yeah.
were 100% for targeting people who are protesting, even if you agree with them, disagree with them. And that led the end conclusion to be fund the Capitol Police more. And like this is what the squad did. The squad, the people that they still pretend, and I say pretend, is for defund the police. They're not. They gave the Capitol Police more money. And then the Capitol Police used that money to squash down protests against pipelines being built in indigenous territories.
Mm.
So what the left has done, they use these boogeymen. Right now, Hamas is the boogeyman. Terrorism is the boogeyman. The same way that crime is the boogeyman. And now they
Farmers.
use MAGA. Go
Farmers are
ahead.
the boogeymen.
Yeah, farmers are the boogeyman. The anti-vax are the boogeyman. The truckers are the boogeyman. I loosely follow what happened to the Canadian truckers, and I hope that's a lesson because as soon as you challenge Western state power, they will quickly show you guys that your rights are temporary. Which is why I kind of focus on the police state as well because that's their armed thug. They're the armed thugs of capital. Like if we ever got to the point where we could challenge their power, you're gonna see the Canadian trucker stuff go on. You're gonna see that. Then I want to get back to my point because you see the left, they make this devil's bargain where they're going to side with fascist state power into the belief that they will shield them from the other. And when I mean the other, I mean like the MAGA, the Hamas, the people we're talking about them fear mongering over. So I don't know when this developed, but it even affected people who consider themselves radical leftists, socialists, who are saying they relying on state power. They relying on the FBI to go after MAGA. And I'm like, do I hate the FBI? No, I would love to take down Trump, but not using the FBI. You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. But I'm trying to explain like this pattern of liberal and left politics and relying on power structures that we are meant to tear down and reform, but they rely on that to take out people they view as being overall threatening to humanity, and they become the monsters themselves in the process. Hopefully that makes sense as I explain my path back to you.
Here's okay. I want to say something. So an example of what you said when the government in the UK was looking at imposing mandates for the injections. I never call them vaccines. I try not to. Right, for the injections. 8 Labour MPs voted against mandates. Only 8. About 100 Tory MPs, Conservative MPs, voted against the mandates. Now, as someone who
There would be no Democrats though. If that was, I don't know if there was ever a vote like that, like directly opposing mandates, but I'm pretty sure there'd be no Democrats. If that make you feel a little better, but go ahead.
8 is nothing. 8 is nothing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I value my bodily autonomy. My body. The state doesn't own my body. Doesn't own my children's body or my wife's body, right? We own our body. We can work it out. The state doesn't tell me when I can or can't go and see my mother-in-law. We will work that out. We love our grandmother, my kid's grandmother, more than the state ever does. We'll take care of her.
Absolutely, that's a good point.
So then I go and ally myself with the Tory right wingers, the libertarian wing, the right wing, and now I'm a white supremacist right winger. Yay! Great, smear me. Don't deal with the argument. But I think here's what I think happens, right? People got scared, people got demoralized, and people don't question. People don't question. They don't question, they don't question, they don't question, and they don't look elsewhere. And I see this a lot with my friends and family. Say, for example, we could take it on. So definitely happening with the injections. They don't question, just do as you're told. Say, do what the man on the TV says. Just roll up your sleeves and every day for another shot, right? So they just accept without questioning, which I think is a function of schooling. And by the way, Nick, my 16-year-old, 19-year-old never went to school. They were unschooled. They played and played and played and learned as they played, developed.
I talk about this all the time. I had to re-educate myself. Before I expound on that, just to make you feel better, I am called a white supremacist.
White, oh, that's fabulous. My brother,
like
white supremacist, both of us.
Dude, I've been called white supremacist, adjacent, enabler because I don't support Democrats. That's why. If you wonder why would they call you that, because I don't support Democrats. And so I've seen Bernie people say, "Well, socialist MMA is a crypto right winger because he want Trump to win." Like, so if it make you feel better, if it make my white friends feel better, I'm called a white supremacist too. I know Mexican friends. Everyone is called a white supremacist. They challenge the establishment to the point of absurdity. The same way that the anti-Semitism is becoming a joke. That's the way that the accusations of white supremacy became a joke. And do you know how much that frustrates me as someone who called out white supremacy? Well, I believe the real root strain of white supremacy. No, because now it bastardizes.
No. I think you feel that you've arrived now. You're now one of the white supremacist elite. That's what I think. You've made it.
Yeah, to make a very long point short, man, they really bastardized what I believe are real issues and trivialize it. That's why no one take it seriously, because now everyone's a white supremacist because you don't support the Democratic Party, right? But yeah, I forgot what the original point was, but I just want to make that point. Everyone's a white supremacist if you go against the establishment in general.
Yeah, if you question, that's because there's been articles recently I've seen, like, you mustn't question things.
Mm-hmm.
You mustn't no, don't question, really, because it's dangerous for the elites. No, you have to question. So that's what I think goes on. People don't question, and also they're unwilling to question their own beliefs. So I have. Now, I think I do. And other people may think otherwise, right? People who know me better, well, no, you don't really, Rich, right? In my time, I've been a vegan for a year. I've been vegetarian for 4 years. And you try being vegetarian in Pakistan. It's very interesting. Say, Bete, have you become a Hindu? No, right? I've been paleo and primal and keto carnivore and our food combined, and now I have a little bit of raw honey and meat and fruit, raw honey, meat and fruit. So I've moved, and then when the whole lockdown thing started, for the first 6 weeks, I went along with it. I went along with it. Seemed sensible. Yeah, yeah, big thing coming and everything. And then one day on a call with some friends, I started thinking, why am I just following what the government's saying without looking into this?
Yeah.
And that's where people don't. And perhaps because of, I know, an inherited legacy of imperialism. You know, wasn't born here. I'm from Pakistan, and perhaps being okay, black has a different meaning in the US to it does in the UK, right? But being of color, visible minority in the UK, you dealing with racial issues and stuff, um, had me question more. Plus, my family's political background, maybe that, right? And I was a bit naughty in school as well. I wasn't one of the obedient ones. I think that's what was my salvation, right? So
Oh
people
yeah,
don't.
I remember a point I was going to get to. I kind of forgot it. Because you mentioned that the re-education. I kind of forgot my point, but I want since now that you mentioned that, because I wasn't a good student either. Like
Yay! That's what
I
saved
was a,
you.
I was a class clown, and honestly, it did. Like I'm not joking. I thought like I love history. I explain this on my channel all the time. I love history. I fell in love in history when I was around 1920
Right,
because I realized that everything they taught me in school was bullshit. And
right,
after I realized that, I got interested. Like, hold up, if they taught us bullshit, what's the truth? So I have a thirst. I got like a thirst for knowledge in my 20s, and like around 19, 20, 21, and it's led to become the person I am now. Like I'm like unrecognizable as I was a teenager. I would consider myself very normy. Like I was like a normal Democrat. I would like Obama. You know what I mean? And then I started learning because I realized how bad public education was. And public education, and I can only speak of the US, I'm not familiar with the UK. I only can assume it's similar.
yeah,
It's all about crushing critical thinking. They want to turn people to obedient worker ants that don't question government authority. In fact, once again, I can't speak for UK. I can only assume similar. There's no media literacy. The assumption in schools is that people of authority is always telling the truth, and following the government is a civic duty. And I'm sorry to interject, but I really want to put this right here because this is why people just went along with the lockdowns, the mandates, and all this stuff. That's why people just go along with our government bombing other countries with horrible explanations. It's because of long school programming from public education, where they just been ingrained from day one that whoever the information comes from authority should be trusted, should be respected. So, in a sense, public education does a disservice. It robs you of your critical thinking. There
yeah.
are people
Look,
that did way more
okay.
better analysis than me that robs you of your creativity. But past I know you want to go ahead,
Yeah,
brother.
yeah, yeah. No, listen, we have to be careful here. We have to be careful here. I would love to come on your channel, right, or have another conversation purely about home education. I've given evidence to the parliamentary inquiry a few years ago about home education. I got it all inside out. It's completely a tool of imperialism. That's what it was set up.
I'm very interested in hearing that because I never heard that argument before.
That'll have to be another conversation, right? I
Yeah, we can do that one time. We
this
can do
thing
that one
about
time.
people not questioning. So if I don't question, people accept. And one of the things that drives me crazy is how people accept the complete nonsense and BS about Trump. Right now, I'm not a Trump supporter. However, I do appreciate that he's the first president since Jimmy Carter to not start a new war, that he wanted to pull the troops out of Syria and Afghanistan, that he refused to bomb Iran when Bolton and was it Milley or something were pressing him to do so. He said, no way, no way, I'm not dropping bombs to kill people just because they destroyed an unmanned drone. I'm not going to do that, right? And if you're going to challenge Trump, you've got to do it with integrity, not on a groundswell of lies, because then those lies will be used against the people that we want. So all this, and now I've mentioned the country of my birth. I have to be careful because I can no longer cover it on my channel because of how authoritarian the regime is, that it will penalize the families of vloggers abroad,
Crazy.
right? So, but
One
they're using the same process there as they're using in the US, and then that will be used again subsequently. Like you want to beat Trump, beat him fair and square on something. You want to beat Trump, then you put up an even better anti-war candidate. And then just on this, the other reason why I'm a racist and a xenophobe and a white supremacist, apparently, allegedly, Nick, right? I've been called that, is because I've switched my position on open borders. Because it used to be in the left, okay, you can let people in because it's all racist and everything in one world, right? And I went, wait a minute, if there's no, and now seeing what's happening in the US and in Europe and in the UK as well, it's happening as well. Open borders didn't serve the Native Americans. They had no say on who was coming in. Open borders didn't serve the people of Africa who were unable, they didn't have the means to resist the European colonialists coming. Open borders didn't serve the people of India. They didn't have any say in those people coming in. Open borders didn't serve the people of Tasmania. You know what happened to the Tasmanian Aborigines? When the British arrived, the British colonialists arrived, they hunted and killed every single one like they were animals. You bring in open borders and you destroy local culture, you destroy local traditions, you set people fighting against each other. It's one thing where you're having legal migration because there's a need for jobs, the economy is expanding. But just to let people in and struggling for resources, you set up friction.
There's a lot to say to this, and I'm a let's get to Trump and then I get to the open borders thing because I think the open border thing where we have a slight disagreement and
Okay.
it's gonna be interesting. It can be a very interesting civil disagreement. Regarding Trump, I largely agree that Trump derangement syndrome is very annoying, it's very counterproductive, and it led to the rightward imperialist shift to the Democratic Party. And the reason why I never agree with Trump derangement syndrome is because the premise of Trump derangement syndrome is this, is that we must support someone as horrible as Hillary Clinton. We must support someone as horrible as Bill Clinton because they somehow had the moral high ground over Donald Trump. This never squared with me, sir. The people that destroyed the Middle East somehow has the moral high ground over Trump. The person who wrote the crime bill has the moral high ground over Donald Trump. Now, see, now these things never squared with me. This is why Trump derangement syndrome never made sense to me. That's why I don't obsess over Trump like everyone else does. The idea that Liz Cheney is a better person than Donald Trump. The idea that John McCain, the war criminal racist, is better than Donald Trump is absurd. That is the definition of Trump derangement syndrome if you believe in those things. Now, Trump is a class enemy. He's a class enemy. He's of the billionaire class, and I have the ability to tackle on Trump on things that he truly need to be confronted and need to be opposed on. And this is I'm talking about like his opposition to unionization, unions, and the pro-labor movement. He squashed unions, have a record of not paying workers. He's extremely anti-working class, and everyone on the left must call this out. But the reason why the liberals can't call this out because they're anti-labor too. They are anti-labor too. So how can they critique Trump when they have the same position on Trump on labor? You see, I notice my criticism of Trump doesn't make people's skin crawl because it's a material critique of Trump that's not rooted in derangement as obsession over his personality. And now the only slight putback I have on what you said as well, I think Trump is less hawkish than obviously Biden and the average neoliberal, but I think Trump's unwillingness to govern in a lot of ways. His willingness to be just a celebrity leads him to just trust the establishment and hire people like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and the war State Department goons. And not starting wars is not a he engaged in sanctions regimes that escalated tensions, which led to the problems we are dealing with right now. Trump wanted to attack Venezuela, but he actually was stopped. Like he wanted to lead an invasion in Venezuela. So I get your point that Trump is overall less hawkish than Democrats in general, but once again, he is no saint. He is a class enemy that must be engaged. But I do accept your point that Democrats have no moral high ground over him and they can't attack them. And now I want to get to the open board thing. This is probably where we're gonna have a little bit disagreements here. Because you say it's like a left wing position. The thing is, it's not really even a left wing position. Open borders is actually an old school libertarian idea.
Mhm.
It's an idea
It's a
that
left wing position in the UK.
now, we don't have to we don't split hairs over definitions here.
Right.
But
Okay.
in the United States, it came from the right wing idea that you want to have limited government.
Yeah.
So and me personally, I'm more in favor of open borders. And I tell you, it's out of selfish. I'm selfish in this because I want to see the world. I don't want bureaucracy to get in my way. If I want to move to Mexico, people right wingers tell me this all the time. If you hate American, then why don't you leave? I'm like, man, I really wish I could. I don't got a back passport. I really wish there was less bureaucracy. So there's a big part of my argument that is rooted in being selfish, because I believe in the general freedom of movement of people. And one thing I will push back a little bit on regarding your argument what you made earlier regarding how open borders doesn't serve Africa and colonialized people. I think that is ultimately the result of the imperial army that invaded
Yeah,
these lands. And I don't think it's because they had open borders. I think it's rooted in the idea of self-defense. That's why I'm not a liberal. I'm not a pacifist. I believe that one of the most important things that we can do as revolutionaries and as free people is learn self-defense. That's why I'm a martial artist of 15 years. I think we should arm up. I think we need to defend ourselves against colonized invaders, against people that may do us harm. And I'll say all this because I understand the concern. You know what I mean? I understand the economic concern. I understand on a fundamental level why you want to protect what it means to have a nation. This is why I actually find this conversation and debate interesting, even people disagree with me,
mm,
because I understand that on a root level. Um, and there's so much to unpack. I don't want to be too long, but like when people have critiques of movement of people, are we critiquing companies moving? Are we critiquing the movement of money? Like there's this new term called globalists, right?
yeah,
And globalists are people who I would just call capitalists. These are people who exploit labor from multiple countries, multiple labor forces. And capitalists are not going to allow borders to stop the profit. So once they maximize the profit within the border, they then expand elsewhere. This is called the freedom of trade. And
yeah.
my proposition is if we're going to have freedom of trade where companies can move, I think workers should be able to have the ability to move, and we got to adjust our society to that. Now, with that said, I'm very sympathetic to the idea of defending borders in the country. We got to keep these liberty-minded things in mind. Like it's the freedom versus security question. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we don't know who's going across the border. It may destabilize, but how much freedom are we sacrificing? But that's my general argument. I would love to hear what you say
Well,
in response. But
Nick,
go ahead.
I know we're but we got to finish up soon, right? I'm going to make one last point, and then we
Yes,
can
sure,
finish
sure,
and we
sure. We
can
can
wrap
wrap
up.
up. I'm
We
sorry. I know I
love to
can
do
rant
this.
a while, but go
No, no,
ahead.
no, 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 not at all. No, it's been an absolute joy talking to you, and it's really, really refreshing. Oh my God, another lefty who like pretty much yes, 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 right? And I've learned a lot from what you've
Yeah,
said. So here's the thing that I think that we're dealing with currently that the left doesn't acknowledge, and most people don't acknowledge the influence of the World Economic Forum. There is a war against us, and it's not like
I
a
agree.
war we've known before. Like a hot war, an imperial conquest, or anything, right? Or even a class war by breaking unions or anything like that. No, this is a war where they're tricking us to take in poisons, and this is a war where they're weaponizing the movement of people in order to set us up against each other, in order to divide and rule, in order to weaken local national governments, to deprive us of sovereignty. Same thing with the trans agenda, fueled by the WEF, the climate change agenda, fueled by the WEF, them and their partner organizations. Censorship fueled by the WEF and their partner organizations. So the old traditional responses that we had got to take into account that we got to adapt them for this new emergent enemy that we're dealing with right now. And
Yeah,
then
and
we
and
will
that would be,
prevail.
and I know we long time, but that would be a long conversation because I will be very interested in having a conversation with people who disagree with me on solutions to the problem. You know what I mean? Like even if you don't agree with my philosophy and premise on this, I would love to like how can we empower the working class despite the surge of migrants? Because the claim is that people care about the workers. So how we empower the worker despite this surge? What
Yeah.
I see, and this will be my last thought. We were getting in here the escalation of a police state in response. And I'm not saying this is your solution. I didn't hear your
Oh no,
solution.
no, no,
But
no.
a lot of people who fearmonger over borders. And once again, you're in the UK. I gotta remember there's a country difference. In the United States, it's different. In the
Mm,
United States, these people, their solution is to give more money to ICE and DHS to expand the police state that failed to prevent the problem in the first place. So I want to have a comprehensive solution. So if you're really upset about the migration problem, and you're in the United States, one thing we can do is lift the Cuban embargo. One
mm,
thing we can do is end the sanction regime on Venezuela. Once again, you guys see how this is completely different than the UK because you guys don't have a sanction regime. But so in the United States, it's completely different than your conversation. Like we got in U.S. imperialism, in U.S. sanctions, we got a normalized relationship with these Central American countries we destabilized. This is the true solution to ending the migration crisis. So absolutely, last thought. Even though I have the general position of, I guess, sympathetic. I don't call it open border. I just call it freedom of movement. But I guess I'm not going to run from it. People will classify me as someone who support open borders. But I actually support the solution to the problem more than people who are for closed borders, because I am for ending sanctions. I am for creating a situation where there's not a migrant crisis. And in the United States, because I can only speak for my country, a lot of people who fearmonger in this country are not interested in solution. That's my last thought. No, I'm talking a lot. I apologize for the rant, but
No,
it was
Nick,
fun.
not
Good
at
show, man. I
all.
appreciate coming on.
Nick, nothing to apologize for, nothing at all, right? It's been really, really great and refreshing talking to you. We got to do this again, right? Really,
Yeah, for
really.
sure. I got to bring on RBN sometime as well. So it'd be interesting having from someone who had different perspectives on things, because we try to break the echo chamber. You know what I mean? So it's good to
Yeah,
have
yeah,
someone
yeah,
who
yeah.
don't agree with us on everything, but we can still have a civil conversation. I enjoy it. So
Yes,
thanks for
absolutely.
having me on.
And I have to shut my mouth because I want to come back to you on that, and then you want to come back to what I say then, and then on it goes, right?
Yeah,
On it goes.
yeah.
Okay.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to speak again, right? Really, really appreciate this. And thank you, everybody. Please go and check out Revolutionary Black Network on Twitter and YouTube and wherever else they are. I'll have the links in the description below. And he has gone because he was very short of time. So thank you so much. And please follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT. Join my official Telegram announcements channel. And also follow me on Odyssey, 3Speak, and Rumble. All the best. Bye-bye.